So, welcome to Introduction to the Humanities, Humanities 1. I'm Professor Krichka. I will be your professor for this semester, and I wanted today to give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing thematically this semester, and then what you can expect in terms of the workload from week to week. So, those are the two things I will be discussing today. So you might be wondering, what are the humanities? The humanities is a very broad term. So one way that we want to think about the humanities for our purposes is as a form of storytelling and a form of expression as well. So if the humanities' job is to document the human experience, we are documenting the human experience in order to define and understand culture so that we can better interpret our past and how our present bears the imprint of the past and where we fit into all of this as well. So the umbrella of humanities includes a ton of different disciplines, including history, philosophy, art history, cultural studies, and tons of other stuff as well. So for our purposes, we want to think about how the humanities are disciplines of memory and imagination. So they help us record history, but they also help us interpret and express our relationship to that history as well. So what we're thinking about here is that the humanities help us better interact and interpret our own place in history and in contemporary culture and society. So if we are using stories to make sense of ourselves and where we fit in, it matters who is telling these stories, who gets to be in charge of the historical narrative, who gets to be in charge of the shared memory of a particular time and place. And as we know, some stories get told over and over again, and that kind of gives them quite a bit of power. So these stories become history and myth, and they shape what we think is possible and how we understand ourselves in relationship to both the present and the past. So in terms of our approach to the humanities, we're going to be narrowing in. We're going to be thinking about California, and we're going to be thinking about the idea and concept of public space in the humanities as well. So why California? Because California is super interesting and we live here. So if we're thinking about what can the humanities do for us, if it's about understanding where we are, we may as well understand where we stand, right? So by looking at stories of California, we're going to get a kind of deeper understanding of our state. We're going to get a glimpse into these kind of nationally scaled conversations about personal identity, about justice, about public history, citizenship, and many other ideas as well. So what we're asking the humanities to do for us this semester is to help us become better members of our California community, to become better advocates, and to become better informed voters as well. So what about public space? So one of the ideas that we're going to be examining is that many scholars in the humanities have argued that the availability or the lack of availability of truly accessible and inclusive public space tells us something about the nature of political culture and political power. So as we are reading this semester, we're going to be thinking about the quality and character of public space and what that tells us about the culture and society in which these spaces exist. So since we're focusing on California, we'll be thinking about who gets to count in this definition of the public throughout California history as well. So what we're going to focus on in particular is how activists, artists, and storytellers are working to make this idea of the public more inclusive. We've heard the terms public good, public space. And so it's like, who is that public and who gets to define who is part of that concept of the public as well. Okay, so as we're sort of moving into our discussions, we are going to see the way that public space becomes a space of conflict, and we are probably pretty familiar with the way that public spaces become a rather fraught and controversial space of conflict in the contemporary moment as well. With the national reckoning with racial injustice and our current public health crisis, these issues and questions of safety in public space and the kind of relevance and inclusive nature of public history are becoming more and more important as we continue to sort of make sense of these current crises. And what we're going to sort of see is that public space and public history are going to be sort of central spaces in which we are going to interpret the history of California. Okay, so There are two things that I need you all to do during this first week, which is August 24th through 29th. I want you to complete the meet and greet discussion by August 26th. And then please complete the California and Humanities discussion board by Saturday, August 29th. These are the two things that you need to do in order to secure your spot in the class. There are folks on the waiting list, and so I need to be able to know who is active from the roster and who isn't. Okay, and then starting in week 2, we'll be getting into our kind of regular flow of content. So at the beginning of each week, I'll be posting a short lecture and PowerPoint that gets you ready for the week's readings. Each week there'll be 1 or 2 reading, and then there will be a discussion board or quiz associated with each of them that needs to be completed before our weekly Zoom meeting. The Zoom meeting will offer a chance to discuss our topics and readings in depth, ask questions, and just engage more deeply. It will be recorded and posted for those who cannot make it live. Attendance is not mandatory for the Zoom meeting since this is an asynchronous online class. So at the end of each week, there will be a more substantive discussion board or short writing assignment that will be due each week on Saturday. Okay, so that is just a short overview. I hope that everyone is doing well and is having a relatively stress-free beginning of fall 2020, all things considered. I look forward to getting to know each of you and getting into our materials next week. Take care.